Okay, AP Micro Chapter 3, let's do this. So I'm gonna real fast do a refresher on supply and demand. So on the left side on the y-axis we have our price, the x-axis is quantity. Alright, equilibrium is the point of intersection in a free market. Consumer surplus is this triangle, producer surplus is this. Producer surplus is the total amount that producers benefit from the prices they sell, like they end up paying this, but they would pay this here. Here they would pay this, or sorry, they would sell it for this, but they ended up selling it for this. For consumers, it's the other way. They would buy it for this, they buy it for this instead, all the way to equilibrium. Now let's say that we have a price ceiling, and let's say our equilibrium is $6 for our good, and let's say we have a price ceiling at $4. Now, what this is going to end up doing is this is going to create, here's supply, demand, this is going to create a shortage since only this many of our product are being produced while this many are demanded. And this is going to inevitably create deadweight loss, and that will be this value. So again, government policy interventions going to reduce the total surplus producer and consumer from whether compared to a free market. Now you can say the same thing about a price floor, demand and supply. The price is $6, but let's say a minimum price is set at $8 that consumers have to pay. Well, now there's going to be a lot more suppliers producing that product, but not as many people willing to buy it for that price, and so that will create deadweight loss as well. Not ideal, but these policies are in place in order to help a specific group, but they don't always work out perfectly. Now let's say that a tax was implemented on a certain product, and we now have tax revenue. What the tax will do is it will shift the supply curve over to the left, decreasing it. But we can also show this another way, which is simpler. We can show this as a tax wedge instead. And this is the new amount that consumers have to buy it at. This is the new amount that suppliers get to keep. This was our equilibrium, and we have this beautiful deadweight loss. Now, this area right here is the burden that the consumers pay from the tax, and this area right here is the burden that the producers pay. And based on the elasticity of both supply and demand, this can differ, and I will real quickly show two extremes. Let's say that our demand is perfectly inelastic, and we have inelastic supply. Now, since the demand is perfectly inelastic, the consumers have to buy it at the same price no matter what, and the quantity demanded is not going to change, so they are going to take all of the burden of the tax revenue. Suppliers still get to keep the same amount. And now I could do perfect inelasticity for supply, but I might as well do perfect elasticity for demand. Alright, we have a perfect elasticity for demand, we have supply. Now in this case, the suppliers are going to be taking all the burden because the consumers they have full discretion over like their quantity that they buy. And the tax wedge will look something like this, with the consumers purchasing at the same price while suppliers take on all the burden. Now let's say we have our domestic market for selling lemonade. We have our supply of lemonade, our demand, and our equilibrium is placed at a solid, let's say it's kind of expensive, $4 per cup for our here's our quantity, but there's the world trade market, and the world trade is set down here at $2. Now, with the domestic market and no world trade, this will be the producer surplus, and this will be the consumer surplus. But since we have world trade, this down here becomes our producer surplus, and all of this becomes our consumer surplus. Effectively, increasing the total surplus, benefiting trade overall, even though the producers get less of a cut. And in our domestic market, all the supply up until this point of $2 is going to be coming from our domestic supply, since these people over here can still benefit from selling it at $2. But from that point beyond, people are going to buy from the world trade market because they can buy it for $2 compared to $4, or even compared to maybe $5 up here, they can still purchase it at $2. Now, when we have a tariff placed on world trade, let's say we have our supply here, demand, world supply. We have a tariff place. Let's say we raised our world price from $2 over to $3 through the tariff. Now, this is going to be the tariff revenue through the government, and then this will be our deadweight loss, and this will effectively increase while this will increase our producer surplus domestically right here. This will also will create deadweight loss and decrease our consumer surplus, which will be all of this.